Hello and welcome to the 12 Rugby Podcast. I'm pleased to announce we got Harvey and Zach. But today, boys, we're not quite doing a podcast. We're doing something different. We're going to review the documentary we all watched. We all watched at the same time, not together. Zach is over in Scotland, but we watched Oceans Apart. Very moving documentary. It's a new series we're going to start here on the channel. And we're just going to have a wee discussion about different rugby pods and different rugby documentaries and just review different content than just games, because rugby's community and there's more to it, and there was nothing more about a community than this Oceans Apart. Dan Leo, don't know, do you remember Dan Leo playing, Zach? Or
I'll be honest, vaguely. Like I remember him at 2011 World Cup. Vaguely, vaguely. To be fair, I did actually watch. I probably watched them play. We probably watched them play. Did you go to that Ireland Samoa game?
nah, I didn't.
You didn't. Okay, second year. Never mind. Well, I watched them play. He's a good player.
But yeah, he's from Samoa, and he basically lost his right to play for Samoa for standing up for a bit of corruption with the rugby union over in Samoa Rugby, and he just basically goes around the Pacific Islanders trying to look into the corruption and how to improve the game, and basically how these tier two nations, and in particular the Pacific Islanders, are just getting exploited for their talent. And for me, in terms of documentary, it wasn't like a classic rugby documentary. It was more of a story and more of a call to action. And I don't know, watching it now, I just want millions of pounds pumped into Pacific Islander rugby. So I feel the goal behind it reached exactly what was desired. Just now it needs the action.
Yeah, it reminded me watching it. There's a great documentary as well on Prime on the death of a gentleman. It's a cricket documentary, which starts off with one idea. It's them exploring the death of Test cricket, and then it turns into this realization that actually the ICC, the world governing body for cricket, is thoroughly corrupt, and there's serious issues, and it's this kind of call to action at the end. And it's quite similar, I think, with Oceans Apart. It starts off at looking at the rugby unions of the Pacific Islands and they're corrupt, but actually it very much changes to actually hold on a second. It's the World Rugby itself. They're the ones who are corrupt and are ruining the game for the Pacific Islands. It was very moving, personally. It's one of those things I feel like you kind of know it's going on. Like
It was the
maybe in the
figures
back
that
of your
hit
mind.
me when they were
It
actually
was the figures,
talking
yeah.
numbers. How much? What was it, Harvey? Was it 80 quid?
I
80
think it
quid a
was it
game?
was it
£80.
was £300 per tour, so it wasn't even 80 quid because they played 4 tests. So it was
It's less.
it was
It
a
was
little bit less.
75.
Yeah, it was just under £80 a game, really. Which, considering, I think there was a stat thrown that England were getting paid 22,000 either per test or per tour. So
It's crazy.
considering they were both playing against each other at some points in the same stadium, in the same competitions, you do get disparities, but that level of disparity is that's incredible.
Yeah, it really was, like you said, Telf, it was the stats that kind of made it real. Like obviously Pacific Island rugby has been on the downward spiral over the past decade or so. And obviously Dan Leo very much addresses that. A lot of it's to do with the corruption of the fact that political leaders are also rugby union leaders. Like, could you imagine, Nicholas Sturgeon being head of the Scottish Rugby Union?
Boris
And
Johnson being ahead of the
yeah,
RFU, like
it's just a whole different ball game, just in terms of how to approach those people, especially if you're being completely screwed over. It was really moving, and every rugby fan should watch it, I think.
Definitely get on that and get it shared. It's on Amazon Prime. It's only an hour long as well, so I felt it was a good length that you can just sit down and watch it. It's not too takes too much of your time. I liked as well. He Dan Leo was coming, not just he just didn't want everyone to cry and be like, "Oh, look how bad this is." He was actually coming with answers. He was demanding, "What about doing this? What about doing that?" And I guess if we want to start discussing some of the issues, I know the big one was he wanted to change the eligibility rule.
eligibility.
So that tier one if you play for your tier 1 nation, you can then go and play for your tier 2 nation if I don't know.
That's your heritage. If that's
For
Yeah,
example, Charles
yeah.
Piatai and stuff, if they haven't played for the All Blacks, they can change if they want to, maybe later down the career, or Vunipolas playing for Tonga when they're 34. Personally, I never really thought about it. I always thought if you're capped, you're capped. The classic one is Isa Nafewa, came on for 90 seconds in the 2003 World Cup and then became an unreal rugby player in New Zealand, but he couldn't play with them because he played for Fiji for 30 seconds. And they did a big legal case to try and play for New Zealand, and then he lost the legal case, and obviously Fiji weren't going to take him back, and he just didn't play international rugby. And I just feel his was obviously the other way. He wanted to play for the All Blacks, but there is a lot of players who aren't good enough for tier 1 nations. Not good enough, but there's just too much competition around. But they would be so good for a Tonga, Samoa, or a Fiji, and I'd be on board with it.
I think it's good as well because I like where it's coming from. My only issue with it is the countries that are picking up these players. So you see, obviously, England, Australia, New Zealand, and now we're looking at teams like Japan as well, bringing in quite a lot of the Pacific Islanders as well. My issue is, and as horrible as it sounds and as unsympathetic as it might come across, what's in it for them? If they're going to bring them across, give them education, give them housing, pay them, put them into their institutions, and bring them up as world-class rugby players, why then does the player have the choice to then just leave it? Because the reason why they can't now, obviously, is because those unions that I'm on about are going to these players when they're young and saying, look, we understand your situation, maybe only from a financial perspective. Come here, you won't have a single worry, and neither will your family for the rest of your life, but you have to play for us. That's the catch. That's the only catch. And I feel like if they were there, I agree with it to some extent, because obviously if they can do it towards the end of their year, towards the end of their career, when they're potentially not as important to that international team anymore, then fair enough. But I don't think. But then where do you draw the line? Because it's like, right, if I'm 27 but I'm not playing, are you end of the line? But you're not. Or
You might get into the jumping between.
Yeah,
teams.
or if you get to 23 and you haven't quite made it, or haven't quite developed as, or 24, 25, and you haven't quite developed as they initially anticipated, can you then just jump back after taking all the benefits of the larger unions? Do you know what I mean?
But it depends what how you view what the larger unions are doing. I personally, I think they were bang on. Like they're literally just taking the resources of the Pacific Islands and just using it for their own benefits. And
it was
like,
quite moving
it's
seeing where
it's colonialism,
where they grew up and stuff, and
But the issue I've got with it is they're not, like, as bad as it is. I guess they're like situationally forcing them in a way, but they're giving them the option. You either stay here or you come with us. But if they had a viable option at their union, so at Samoa, Fiji, Tonga, if they had a viable option to stay there, earn good money, make a career for themselves, and be a worldwide superstar, they would do it. Every single one of them would. Your Manatu Langi, your Vinapolas, your Falataus, everyone would do it. They all want to play for their thingies, but the issue is you physically and financially cannot. There is just not possibilities. And when you see the amount of corruption and stuff in the Samoan, particularly union, with financial records and everything like that, it gets to a point where it's like, right, I either stay here with my integrity or I go and just supply my family. And considering they're in a culture where family and elders is everything, they're obviously always going to choose to be selfless and take themselves elsewhere, sacrifice their childhood, for example, to bring financial freedom for their family.
What do you think about the stat though that when Tonga changed the rules in rugby league, they've already beaten 3 tier 1 nations, and I could see that happening in Union if Piatai and all are allowed to play. I know I'm just saying Piatai, but he is someone in his prime who wants to play for Tonga who's not really allowed to do it. And I'm sure, like, his brother plays for them, but I'm sure there'll be a good few that would join the bandwagon if one star starts to do it.
Tonga would have an incredible team at the next World Cup. Charles Piatai, Israel Folau, like the list goes on. I think I get what you're saying, Harvey. It's just like, where do you got to break the cycle at some point.
Yeah.
And it's just where you choose to do it. I think because of just the state of the tier 1 nations, the fact that the RFU, the IRFU, Scottish Rugby, like they're just full of money. I think it has to start with them. Like the buck stops with them. They have to address what they are doing. The fact that they're just like bleeding dry, the Pacific Islanders, in terms of their talent. The fact that they're not giving them any of the match revenue, which is a complete joke. Like the Tonga Rugby Union is working out of what is basically our equivalent of like a garden shed, and so is Samoa. Like it's staggering just watching those pictures. And I totally understand it can get very blurry, it can get very messy in terms of chopping and changing international rugby becoming like club rugby. But I think it has to start with the tier 1 nations. I think stuff like that, those problems, for me personally, I think just encounter them because like say the eligibility rules change, the distribution of match revenue changes. All of a sudden, tier 2 nations like Samoa and Tonga become very good rugby teams. I think there is then problem down the line for that, because do we then move the rules back again because all of a sudden they're attractive places to play rugby again? But I think you just have to encounter those problems down the line. I think just here and now, I think the rules just need to change.
I
get what you're saying, but
I know I certainly agree with the whole revenue share from tickets. I think that should 100% be changed. They were even bargaining for just 5-10%. I think it should be more than that. Whether you get the unions to agree to that.
£4 a ticket if you're over in Samoa for a game.
Yeah, it's definitely something that should be happened. But obviously, hopping on the devil advocate side again, just like and not that I agree with the CEO of World Rugby in any way what possible in terms of the way he perceives these Pacific Islander teams, but the inertia that would be built from having to ask every single union to change their ticket revenue share it's something that needs to be done. But like you said, they've been attempting it for years, and it just doesn't seem to be able to get through. So either they like, I think the rules have to change from a World Rugby standpoint. They say they don't have control over those kind of things, but maybe they should. Maybe, but then it's like you can't just take control. It's a democracy at the end of the day, so you've got to vote to give off your control.
But then again, that's the problem right there. World Rugby isn't a democracy because, Scotland, France, Ireland, New Zealand, the list goes on. Tier 1 nations have 3 votes. Samoa and Tonga only have 1. And I understand from the point of view that they're clearly bringing more money to the table. Therefore, they should have more say. And I do understand that. But at the same time, it's not democracy if Ireland gets 3 votes and Tonga only gets 1. Because at the end of the day, we're human beings and we're just going to want to keep as much money as we can. That's just the way those
I know Daniel was really pushing that point that he doesn't like that the tier 1 nations get 3 votes. And then clearly the people in charge of the Samoans and the Tongan unions,
their hands are tied.
They're not making decisions based on what the players want to do at all.
I think it starts with the whole ticket revenue share, and I think you try and build financially the sides, and then once they're built financially and facilities are built and they've got some level of development on every single union, I think you can then start looking at it as a viable option for your next generation of Peter Towers, everyone else we've already mentioned.
They'll keep coming. That's what they said on it, that there's always one more coming. Like
there will always come, because the culture in those islands is just rugby. We saw them just tossing the ball around on the on the beach. It was just like it's what they do. It's what they're born. It's their nation. It's their national sports. It's their nationals sport. And it's something they'll continue to do. I don't know. It's just one of those that
we're not. I feel we might be sitting here. I feel like we're at a World Rugby meeting here trying to come up with answers. We're just discussing what we've seen, and I want to come up with answers, but obviously within this time frame, we're not going to come up with the answers and change rugby. But we've kind of touched on all those points in terms of fair share rugby or fair share of money. So at the minute, Samoa especially are based on small donations, and he wants that to change, which we talked about with the ticket revenue and all could help. And then obviously the rules with players changing nations. And then the third thing he said was change how rugby is governed and changing the voting and stuff. Realistically, out of those three things that Dan Leo put forward, what do you think is the easiest to change, like tomorrow or over the course of the next year?
I think before the not that it'll matter because it's the Six Nations and it's Northern Hemisphere. I think number one, I think it's match revenue. It's really not that difficult, and I personally don't have time for all the kind of arguments against sharing money. Kind of like, especially what I think it was
COVID's
Stephen
not going to
Jones.
help. COVID's not going to help though.
Aye, but like, come on, like the amount of money those players are getting, like seriously, it's like when Liverpool furloughed their staff. Like, are you taking the mick? You know what I mean? Like, your players are on hundreds of thousands. Like and the onus is then on the players if that's the argument they're going to have. Owen Farrell needs to take a 10 grand pay cut, even though he's already on probably millions. Like, it's just, I think the onus is on tier one nations to actually address, for the sake of the entirety of rugby, not just Pacific Islands, but also other tier two sides like I don't know, Brazil or something.
Georgia.
It was amazing how hard how it was so hard for him to get an interview with the CEO of World Rugby or the Samoan head of rugby on the committees. Like, he could pop out to grind. Like, they really don't want to speak about it, and they eventually squeezed him in because he kept asking, and it's just. I know he's
because
put his head above, like Haskell said about putting your head. No one wants to put your head above the, because it's just not worth it. And he lost his playing career behind it. And I guess now Dan Leo's mindset is like, if he can change Pacific Islander rugby, that he'll do more for the game than he would have if he ever played it. To obviously played it, but he deserved to play it longer. And I do definitely feel they're on the right way, but I don't feel people should look and go, oh, sure, they're up Nations Cup, they're growing like they have Fiji in it. Fiji, in particular, are well ahead of Samoa and Tonga. The documentary kind of focused, tried to get them all in, but it was mainly Samoa. And at last World Cup, Samoa were dreadful, and Tonga weren't much better. And you're seeing Fiji start to make strides, and I don't want, especially Samoa getting and Tonga being left behind. I want them involved in Up Nations Cups and things like that, because they need the big Amazon Prime paycheck we're talking about.
No, I'm totally with you. Like, I think we need to bring everyone along together, and I think the onus is on World Rugby and Tier 1 sides to address just some of the dark practices which are going on. That's like, they don't want to address it, but they're going to have to. Hopefully the documentary will shed enough light on the problems do start to get addressed.
So even like send boys over and fix up this, put a few million into their stadium and fix it for them. Like, the stadium at Samoa was in horrible condition, not even safe.
I think
to play.
it ended up. I think the one of the last statements in the thing, he said something about the stadium being renovated. Did it not?
Yeah, by New Zealand.
Yeah, New Zealand Union went out there and helped them out.
That's what I mean. Need all the unions getting involved and not. I know New Zealand do things like that, but in my opinion, New Zealand are pretty. We're the best. We'll make our own tournament. We'll do this. We'll do that. We'll do what's best for us. In terms of a playing sense, but why New Zealand and stuff not getting super? I know I wrote an article about having a Pacific Islander Super Rugby team. I know it's a lot easier said than done. But I was saying about basing them potentially in Australia and using the resources over there, because basically they have enough Pacific Islanders in Australia and New Zealand to form a team, and all your Islanders hopefully will go towards that team and play there. And I just think there needs to be more ideas coming to the table. Things like Up Nations Cup or Fiji getting in the Rugby Championship. But it's a real shame that COVID stopped Fiji showing what they can do in the Up Nations Cup. But I just hope there's going to be more opportunities in the future, because you're seeing Georgia now will hopefully grow. And Danley was right, and it was very moving, and I definitely recommend everyone watch it. What would you give it then in terms of the Telf Rugby documentary ratings? 1 to 10, 10 being the goat of documentaries.
I'll probably give it a 9, just purely based on the content. And just I quite like Dan Leo, and just he interviewed some big names like James Haskell and stuff. The only thing I would say was it was like just purely from like a cinematography point of view, there was points where it wasn't. I thought it was a wee bit kind of amateur, kind of homemade, but like yeah, 9 out of 10 for me.
I give it a 8 out of 10, just so I don't want to cap myself. I want to leave a couple ratings just in case there's any better ones that we can watch. But it was good. Yeah, I like the way they incorporated the economic and the political side of things as well with it, because ultimately I think that's what drives behind it. The only weird thing is I wish they would have interviewed more people from other unions. Like, yeah, they did a decent job of getting a few people, and I understand that it was obviously incredibly hard to get interviews with these people, but like Haskell would not have been hard to get. Like, he was there obviously, but like if people like that, you know, like an Irish representative, Scottish representative, Welsh representative, that sort of thing, would have been nice to see.
Yeah.
I'll go 8.5. I find it very moving, but production wise, it could have been up there. But literally, we were discussing Harvey about the team on the credits. Literally, Dan Leo's done that himself.
There's one or two people in each section. Like,
Really?
for Amazon level documentary, we're talking no more than 30 or 40 people being involved in the whole thing, which at that level is incredible. Usually you sat there for 30 seconds listening through every single person involved. So
that's powerful.
Fair play to them for getting out there.
We'll definitely come back to this topic in maybe a few months' time and see if he's starting to make progression. And I like how he's being out there, and hopefully more players get on his back. And yeah, and World Rugby moves forward, and hopefully it's a fair playing field, because we want more teams. I
think it just, like, kind of last word, I think just it has to change. Stephen Jones made a great point during the doc. He was just like, this is just not, rugby is not living up to the values that it sets itself. And it's not, and just it needs to change. Something needs to change.
It's all about culture, this doc, and we love culture on this pod. Let us know in the comments as well if you like this style of shorter form content where we just discuss different documentaries, and I'm sure we'll have a few more to review. And let us know what ones you want us to review. I know Building Jerusalem and things like that have been put in the pipeline, so we'll definitely get onto those, and obviously all the classic Lions documentaries. But thanks, boys, for that anyway, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks.
Ciao.